and welcome back to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel where I teach online psychology lessons for my wonderful students. Today, we're carrying on with the attachment unit and we're looking at lesson 9, cultural variations in attachment. Let's get started. In Germany, mothers stay in hospital for up to 10 days after the birth of a baby, but their babies are not in the room with them. They usually stay in the nursery so that the mum can get some rest. They are just brought to mum for feeding only. How do you think this will affect the attachment type of German women and their children? Today we are looking at some of those cultural variations in attachment types. Last lesson, in lesson 8, looking at Ainsworth-Strain situation, we identified 3 different attachment types: secure attachment, which is the good one, and then 2 insecure attachments: insecure avoidant and insecure resistant. And today we are looking at some of those cultural variations. Are there any differences in percentages between those babies that have secure and those that have insecure avoidant and insecure resistant in different cultures? So we've got 3 learning objectives for today. Number 1, show comprehension and apply knowledge of the key study done by Van Ijzendoorn in 1988. Learning objective 2, identify and analyze other studies of cultural variations. And then learning objective 3, to be able to discuss and evaluate cultural variations in attachment. Let's start with learning objective 1. Child rearing styles vary across different cultures. The question is how these might impact on the proportions of different attachment types in different countries. It might be that attachment types are the same across the world, or they might be different. We look in detail at this classic meta-analysis of cultural differences by Van Ijzendoorn. What is a meta-analysis, I hear you speak? Well, a meta-analysis is when you compile lots of different research all together into one research study. So, for example, if I was looking to do a meta-analysis on on attachment types within different cultures, I might go and have a look at all the different, this is what Van Ijzendoorn did, right? I'm going to have a look at all the different countries that have used this strange situation, Ainsworth-Strain situation, and I'm going to compile them all together into one piece of research and analyze them as a whole. Okay? Before we get started, can we match up the attachment type with the correct definition? Give that a go now, please. 3 attachment types: secure, insecure avoidant, insecure resistant. Can you match them up? Once you've given them a read, it's quite obvious. Let's start with the first one. An attachment type characterized by low anxiety but weak attachment. In the strain situation, this is shown by low stranger and separation anxiety and little response to reunion, an avoidance of the caregiver. Generally thought as the most desirable attachment type associated with psychological healthy outcomes. In the strain situation, this is shown by moderate stranger and separation anxiety and ease of comfort at reunion. And then finally, an attachment type characterized by strong attachment and high anxiety. In the strain situation, this is shown by high levels of stranger and separation anxiety, by resistance to be confronted at reunion. So it's going to be like that. Huzzah. Let's have a look at Van Ijzendoorn's 1988 study into cultural variations in attachment. Marius van Ijzendoorn and Peter Kroonenberg in 1988 conducted a study to look at the proportions of secure, insecure avoidant, and insecure resistant attachments across a range of countries. They also looked at the differences within the same countries to get an idea of variations within a culture as well. The researchers located 32 studies of attachment where the strange situation had been used to investigate the proportions of infants with different attachment types. These 32 studies were conducted in 8 countries. 15 were in the USA. Overall, the 32 studies yielded results for 1,990 children. So that's one strength of having a meta-analysis. Massive population or participants, essentially. Large participants, lots of participants means that it's more representative of the population, therefore it's more generalizable, okay? The data for these 32 studies were meta-analyzed, results being combined and weighted for sample size. What do you think the research will find? Will the proportions of secure, insecure avoidant, and insecure resistant attachment types between similar or different countries? It's a typo. All right. So here are the proportions. The green is the secure, orange is insecure avoidant, and red is insecure resistant. In the exam, they could give you a graph like this and just say, analyze the data, and it'll be your job to analyze the data. So, what I can conclude from this? Well, you can see that all of the countries, so we got Great Britain, Sweden, Japan, Netherlands, United States, Israel, Germany, and China. Every single one of the countries involved in this meta-analysis, the secure attachment was the most popular attachment, ranging from around 75% in Britain to around 50% in China. Nonetheless, it is the most popular attachment type in all the countries. But the insecure attachment type is one that sort of varied the most. You can see in countries like Britain and Sweden, insecure resistant was very rare. In Britain, I think it was only 3%, whereas in countries like Japan, Israel, and China, insecure resistant was a lot more popular, possibly up to around just below 30% in Israel and just below 30% in Japan as well. Whereas insecure avoidant attachment types look to be the most in Germany, it looks like, around 10, 20, over 30%, 33-ish% was insecure avoidant in Germany. So, here are the findings. There was wide variation between the proportions of attachment type in different studies. In all countries, secure attachment was the most common classification. Yes, that's what we could see from the graph. However, the proportions varied from 75% in Britain to 50% in China. Insecure resistant was overall the least common type, although the proportions ranged from 3% in Britain to 30% in Israel. Insecure avoidant attachments was observed most commonly in Germany and least commonly in Japan. An interesting finding was that variations between results of studies within the same country were actually 150% greater than those between countries. In the USA, for example, one study found 46% securely attached compared to one sample as high as 90%. So what they found was there wasn't that big a difference comparing countries to each other. However, they found drastic differences of attachment types within the same country, and that might be to do with class or socioeconomic backgrounds. Right, cultural variations. Get the definition for us. Write the definition down. Give yourself a couple minutes and draw a picture to illustrate the key term. Okay, cultural variations. I haven't given you the words. I want you to work them out. Let's do it together. Culture refers to the norms and values that exist within any group of people. Cultural variations then are the differences in norms and values that exist between people in different groups. In attachment research, we are concerned with the differences in the proportion of children of different attachment types. Okay. Application question. This is AO2. Apply your AO1 knowledge to this scenario. It would be even better if you can quote parts of the question in your answer to justify your thinking. Here we go. Helga's worried. The proportion of infants classified with each attachment type differs between nationalities. Helga and Lars have recently moved to England from Germany with their son Kurt. They take part in some attachment research at their local university and are disturbed to hear that Kurt has an insecure, avoidant attachment. Should Helga and Lars be concerned by this? Refer to the proportions of German children of each attachment type in the Van Ijzendoorn study in your answer. Okay, should they be worried? Yes or no? Explain your reason for that. Give yourself 5 minutes, write your answer down, okay? Don't do it in your head. The exam isn't done telepathically. You need to write your answers down. Practice writing them in exam style, okay? Write them down, give yourself 5 minutes. That's how long you'd have in the exam, right? Give that a go. And I'm going to go through the answer now. Should Helga and Lars be concerned by this? Refer to the proportions of German children of each attachment type in the Van Ijzendoorn study. Helga is worried because Kurt has been assessed as having a type A attachment insecure avoidant. In Britain, only 20 to 25% of babies are classified as type A, and we see this as a bad thing. However, in Germany, it is more common to display this type of attachment behavior. The evidence from the Van Ijzendoorn study showed that in Germany, insecure avoidant attachment is more common than in Britain, about 60% secure and 35% insecure avoidant. Therefore, Helga should be less worried because Kurt is displaying an attachment behavior that is more common for a child with German parents. And that's the Van Ijzendoorn study. That's the key study that looks at the cultural variations in attachment. Can you identify one thing you've learned about Van Ijzendoorn's research? Why do you think learning about this is important? Does this apply in real life? Who is this information useful to? Do you have any more questions? Right. That is learning objective 1. Tick it off. Ching, we done it. Let's move on to learning objective 2. Identify and analyze other studies of cultural variation. Now, Van Ijzendoorn's was the key study, but there are other studies that we can look at looking at the cultural variations in attachment. Let's start with some of those. We've got an Italian study. Simonella et al. Conducted a study in Italy to see whether the proportions of babies of different attachment types still matched those found in previous studies. The researchers assessed 76 12-month-olds using the strange situation. They found 50% was secure, with 36% insecure avoidant. This is a lower rate of secure attachment than has been found in many studies. The researchers suggest this is because increasing numbers of mothers of very young children work long hours and use professional childcare. These findings suggest that cultural changes can make a dramatic difference to patterns of secure and insecure attachment. Okay. So what they found was that there was lower levels of secure attachment in Simonella's study, which was done in 2014. Okay, so it's more recent. I would argue that if we were to do more research into this, secure attachments might be even lower. I think that with the increase of technology and having our phones and using our phones, if a parent is using their phone and they're on the screen more, that means they've got less time for their child, less time for the reciprocity, less time for the interactional synchrony, those caregiver-infant interactions. And as we know, those are the things that help us form those attachments. If you're giving more time to your phone and less time to the child, as I can see, you're walking down the street, someone's pushing a pushchain, they've got their face in a phone and not even looking at the kid, right? That kid's desperate for attention. They're trying to form an attachment, but they can't. I think that we're going to be forming less secure attachments as we go along. But that's just my theory, not based on any evidence or any research. So take it with a pinch of salt. There's also a Korean study done by Jin et al. In 2012 who conducted a study to compare the proportions of attachment types in Korea to other studies. The strange situation was used to assess 87 children. The overall proportions of insecure and secure babies were similar to those in most countries, with most infants being secure. However, more of those classified as insecurely attached were resistant, and only one child was avoidant. This distribution is similar to the distribution of attachment types found in Japan by Van Ijzendoorn and Cronenberg's 1988 study. Since Japan and Korea have quite similar child-rearing styles, this similarity might be explained in terms of child-rearing style. So, here's the conclusion. Secure attachment seemed to be the norm in a wide range of cultures, supporting Bowlby's idea that attachment is innate and universal, and this type is the universal norm. However, the research also clearly shows that cultural practices have an influence on attachment type. Here's a quick question. Outline what research has found out about cultural variations in attachment. That's outline is an AO1 question, right? Outline is AO1. You just need to talk about the procedures and the findings. Van Ijzendoorn and Cronenberg, they found that secure attachment was the most common classification in all countries, but ranged from 50% in China to 75% in Britain. In individualist cultures, rates of secure resistant attachments were similar to Ainsworth's original sample, all under 14%, but this was not true for the collectivist samples from China, Japan and Israel, where rates were above 25% and where rates of insecure avoidant attachments were reduced. And they were the other studies of cultural variations. Identify one other thing that you've learned about these cultural variations. Again, why is this important? Who is this important to? Right? How does this apply in real life? Well, I guess if you were trying to understand certain people from different cultures, then maybe you can consider some of their child rearing practices, so maybe that will give us a better understanding of them. Maybe if you were looking to adopt a baby, maybe that's why this information might be useful, because depending on the culture you're adopting the child from, depends on what type of child rearing practices you're likely to find. And that's other studies. Learning objective 2 done. We're moving on to LO3 to be able to discuss and evaluate cultural variations in attachment. But before that, I've got a cultural joke. Okay, here we go. I wrote this myself. As your dad, I want you to learn more about your Korean culture. K-pop. Evaluation. Right, what are some of the strengths and limitations of cultural variations in attachment? Large samples. A strength of combining the results of attachment studies, which is a meta-analysis, carried out in different countries, is that you end up with a very large sample. For example, in the Van Ijzendoorn's meta-analysis, there was a total of nearly 2,000 infants and their primary attachment figures. Even studies like those of Simonella et al. And Jin et al. Had large comparison groups from previous research, although their own samples were smaller. This overall sample size is a strength because large sample sizes increase internal validity by reducing the impact of anomalous results caused by bad methodology of very unusual participants. Larger population, larger sample size means it's more representative of the population, and therefore you're more able to generalize the findings. So this is a strength. Alternative explanation for cultural similarity. Bowlby's explanation for cultural similarities is that they are due to the fact that attachment is innate and universal, and thus produces the same kind of behaviors all over the world. Van Ijzendoorn and Cronenberg propose an alternative possibility. They suggest that small cross-cultural differences may reflect the effects of the mass media, in which a large number of books and TV programs that advocate similar notions of parenting are disseminated across countries. Okay, let's break that down. Bowlby is saying that attachments are innate. Innate meaning natural. They naturally occur. They're universal. So regardless of where you come from, regardless of what country you're born in or where you're from, you should all have the same innate need to attach. So they are universal. You don't learn them. They are natural. Okay? So that's what Bowlby suggests, okay? And this is evidence to show why, secure attachment was the most common attachment found in all societies. However, an alternative explanation is saying that with globalization, with the fact that now every country is so interlinked and we can see and have a look at each other's cultures, and people in non-Western society watch Western TV, and they can see the way in which people in America or Britain or wherever you're watching bring up their children, and that has an influence on them, and they think that maybe that has an influence on parenting styles, and that attachment isn't necessarily innate. So there's an alternative explanation for cultural similarities. That's a weakness. The strange situation also lacks validity. There is a basic issue with using the strange situation in research. Last lesson we considered whether the strange situation might not be measuring attachment at all. Kagan et al. Suggested that attachment type is more related to temperament or personality than to the relationship with the primary attachment figure, in which case the strange situation is not assessing attachment, it is simply measuring anxiety. So what this is saying is, say for example you bring a child into the strange situation and they don't like it when their mother leaves the room, showing separation anxiety, or they don't like it when a stranger walks in, showing stranger anxiety. That might not necessarily be indicative of what attachment type they have. Maybe that's just their personality. Maybe they're a type of infant that doesn't like being left alone. Maybe they're a type of infant that don't trust strangers, and maybe this strange situation isn't a valid or genuine way of measuring attachment type. So that's one weakness of this strange situation. People argue, actually, I don't think Ainsworth's strange situation is a very good way of measuring attachment types. Okay, so people have questioned the validity, the genuineness of this observation. It was a controlled observation. Okay, so other people like Kagan have argued that it isn't actually testing attachment type. It's just testing personality. It's just testing temperament, the way that you are. Some people like to be with other people, some people don't, let's say an insecure avoidant attachment type where the mother leaves the room and the baby doesn't care, does that show that they have a bad personality? Kagan would argue, no, not necessarily. Maybe they're just a type of child that likes to be more independent. Okay, so this is a limitation. Right, here's the task. I want you to write the evaluative points into a Peel paragraph structure. If you write them in this structured format, you're more likely to get higher marks for your evaluation. If you just give the point itself, you might get some marks, great, but you won't be squeezing all of the juice out of that orange. How do you get more juice out of the orange? You peel it, okay? Point. One strength, one limitation of this research is, okay, evidence. Give some evidence. For example, if there's research backing up, give the research. Explain. This is a strength because, this is a limitation because. Explain why this is a good thing, why this is a bad thing. And then link it back to the question. This shows that. We can conclude from this that. Okay? And that's the evaluation. Right, that was a quick lesson. Learning objective 3, to be able to discuss and evaluate cultural variations in attachment. Yes, we done it. Plenary. Okay, research methods question, pilot studies. A team of psychologists are interested in cultural variations in attachment. They want to see if the strange situation works as a test of attachment security in a range of countries, including some where attachment type has not been assessed before. They decide to carry out a pilot study in these countries. Question: what is meant by a pilot study? And 2, why is it advisable to carry out a pilot study before using a test on a new population with which it hasn't been tried before? Give yourself 5 minutes, answer those 2 questions. What is a pilot study? What is the strength of pilot studies? Why do they do them? And we're going to look now. A pilot study is a small-scale study carried out before a main study is conducted in order to test an aspect of the methodology. It's a small-scale trial run of the main piece of research. Why is it advisable to carry out a pilot study? Right. It is advisable to pilot a test on a new population before using it on a large scale because it is possible that the new population may not respond to the test as expected. For example, a society with distinct child-rearing practices may react quite differently to strangers, separation and reunion, and this may affect the validity of the strange situation in that cultural context. If your research was to include, say, a questionnaire or interview, there may be some questions that are quite ambiguous or unclear, and you may need to reword those to make it clear for them. Okay? And that was Lesson 9, Cultural Variations in Attachment. Next lesson is Lesson 10, Bowlby's Theory of Maternal Deprivation. Right. Well done, my neo-psychologist. Great work today. I'm really proud of you. I've been Mr. Neo. God bless and peace.
I'm feeling like Will. I feel like a prince. I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills, cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex, they told me to chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flick, now load up the film.